Hey guys, welcome to Thrive and Peak. This is your host Thane. Today is a gloomy Saturday over here in PA, but it's a gloomy morning. And with my schedule, this was today's episode. It's a lot of providing and a lot of masculine and feminine energy, just how that intertwines between the two, and just another way to just bridge gaps. Essentially, it's just something I witnessed firsthand, secondhand, third hand, just like things that you pick up from interacting with people in general and how we can relate. And I'm just trying to bring a new lens into today. So with that being said, I'm going to read from my notes a little bit and we'll continue from there. There's a story I heard once. It goes something like this. A boy is born into a village where that never really accepted him, right? And that makes me think of kind of like Naruto, if you're a fan of Naruto, but like essentially they give him the cold shoulder, they're ignored, they're bothered. It's something out of his control is why they shunned him. But in this specific story of Naruto, this story I'm not entirely sure. But eventually, instead of leaving, instead of asking to be let in, the boy, he ended up burning the village down just to warm his bones on that cold night that he was ignored and left abandoned, right? Now that is an extreme, but when I heard that story, something clicked for me. Because what if I told you that a lot of anger and a lot of hatred and a lot of resentment that we have in this world today, it used to be love. And this is what I want to talk about today. This is why. Excuse me, my allergies I'm still coming off of. It's a weird part of this year. But when people hear anger, usually they think of things come out of cruelty, evil, or even malice. But most of the time it comes from confusion. It comes from misunderstanding and rejection. It comes from caring at first, because you have to think about it. On the contrary, right? Would you feel resentful for someone that you had no meaning with at all? Like, would you be like, I had no interest in impressing this person, but I resent them for no reason? No. You come from a place of when you're trying to belong, when you try to give, when you try to show up, and you're not received in the way that you imagined, right? The rejection just doesn't disappear. It gets stored somewhere, right? And what a lot of us do without even realizing it is we compartmentalize it, right? We compartmentalize that rejection. We tell ourselves, I didn't care anyway. They don't deserve me, whatever. But unresolved rejection doesn't just dissolve. It has the potential to transform. It becomes resentment. It becomes defensiveness, sarcasm, withdrawal, or even rage at some points. And then one day you're angry, but you're not even sure why anymore. You just kind of carried it along while carrying your luggage of life, just the things that we pick up in life, but you end up somehow subconsciously carrying that resentment and that anger. And that's the scary part. Because if we don't trace anger back to its source, we start burning villages. Instead of warming ourselves properly with the love and appreciation that we just don't always acknowledge and pick up on, because we're not trained to see it. If you're not looking for it, you're definitely not going to find it, right? And that's what I'm here to show you today, right? I don't know why I picked. All right, I'm just gonna. Okay, I'll put it back down. I want to ground this in something more specifically, right? I can only speak for one gender, obviously, but I was raised by women predominantly, so I try to also accommodate and give my best suggestion when it comes to the female perspective as well. But for men, not exclusively men, this is just where it shows up consistently, where I constantly see it from workplaces, and then when I was in school, I can see it, and then just different walks of life of how people talk. But let's talk about the provider role. Historically, that was the masculine energy when it comes to those things. So the provider, right? A natural trait of masculine energy, and most men in general, and I'm not saying women don't possess this as well either, but it's 2026, so that's why I'm stumbling over my words. You know what I'm saying? I'm kidding. But their energy is to build, to work towards something, and to provide, right? That sense of purpose is what gets a lot of men out of bed in the morning, really. But here's where things get twisted sometimes. People that do provide, they can misuse their power of providing, right? They say things like, if you don't listen to me, I won't provide. And yeah, that can happen in unhealthy dynamics, but that's not the entire picture, because here's the part that no one talks about. The provider is also in a submissive role, because when you provide something, your time, your energy, your protection, your labor, you're offering it to be received. You're saying, here, this is what I have. Does this matter? And the response you get, whether it's appreciation, indifference, or rejection, becomes feedback. And the feedback is fuel, right? That feedback kind of drives for your other interactions, right? But here's the miscommunication. The person being provided for often doesn't realize that the approval and appreciation and acknowledgement are also forms of providing. Does that make sense? So the providee, the person who's receiving, when they give that fuel back, when they give that fuel, it's appreciation, and that appreciation is going to be like, all right, great, that's awesome, I'm going to provide some more. Or if it's negative, like, they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, so on and so forth. It's just awkward at that point. But when it's positive, they're saying you matter. What you did landed, and I see you. But when the appreciation is missing, even unintentionally when it's missing, the provider starts to feel invisible. And that's where resentment creeps in. Not because the provider wanted power, but because they wanted connection. They wanted to feel chosen, valued, and useful. When that doesn't happen, love turns into frustration. Frustration turns into anger. And anger can potentially turn into distance and other things. But this is one thing I think so much anger in the world is actually just misunderstood love. People yelling because they weren't heard, withdrawing because they weren't appreciated, and lashing out because they didn't know how to say, this mattered to me. If we slow down long enough to ask, what did this anger used to be, we might stop burning villages and start warming each other instead. I don't really have all this figured out yet. I'm just getting some ideas out there, and I'm just getting the conversation started. If this video resonated with you in any way, just let me know in the comments. I read every single comment, and I try to reply to every single comment. I'm very appreciative of your time. Thank you for listening to me, and keep thriving the vegan. Have a good one.